Tonight we will have a debate about finding the meaning and purpose of life and in life. Because that is what we do at Het Veritas-forum. Talk and think about big questions in life. Aart Nederveen, thank you for being here. Aart, thank you for being here, and the stage is yours to introduce our speakers.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you all for being with us. I'm also happy to be back at Veritas. I remember that back in the past I moderated another debate, and at that time, after the debate, one of the opponents became Minister of Education. So for one of you there may still be a bright future ahead. I'm also happy to be back at TU Delft. My alma mater. I studied physics in the physics building, which is, I believe, still at this campus. One of those masterpieces of architecture on this campus. We are here to discuss the question whether or not life has a meaning. Is there more to the way we live our lives than just pragmatic reasoning? As I prepared tonight's debate, I was reminded of a famous painting by Raphael, which still resides in the Vatican Museum. In this painting, the great philosopher Plato is depicted pointing upwards towards the heavens, while his student Aristotle gestures downwards to the earth. Well, this scene is commonly understood to represent Plato's belief in the transcendental and ideal, in contrast to Aristotle's focus on empirical observation in the material world. Well, this may well be one of the dichotomies that will also play a role tonight. As we embark on our exploration of the meaning of life, we should obviously be prepared to encounter different perspectives and approaches. It's important that we remain open-minded and engage in a thoughtful discussion. After all, the Latin word for truth is veritas. So that means let us not settle for facile explanation or hand-waving argumentations. Tonight, the truth really matters. And it's up to us to pursue it with diligence and intellectual rigor. Our aim is, by the way, that everyone in this room will be challenged tonight, whether you are Christian or non-Christian. So let me now introduce our two opponents, our two speakers for tonight. And please first join me in giving them a warm welcome. So Boris and Emanuel, please come forward and take your seats. Yeah, well, it's fine. Maybe leave this chair for me. So you'll take this one. Okay, you stay together. That's a good sign. Yeah, I like it. Yeah. So let me introduce the speakers, the opponents for tonight's debate. Start with Boris van der Ham. He was for many years chairman of the Humanistische Verbond in Dutch, the organization of atheists, agnostics, liberals and humanists. He is still associated as a board member of Humanists International in London. He wrote several books and made documentaries for broadcaster Human about apostasy in Islam. He's currently, among many other things, chairman of the Gehandicaptenzorg Nederland. And between 2002 and 2012, he was also a member of the House of Representatives in the Netherlands. He graduated from Maastricht Theater Academy, makes music, and can regularly be seen as an actor in TV series. Next is Emanuel Rutten is a philosopher. He is a lecturer and researcher at the Department of Philosophy of the Faculty of Humanities at the Free University in Amsterdam. He's also affiliated with the Ethos Center for Social Transformation and the Philosophical School of the Netherlands. And his field of research includes metaphysics, epistemology, rhetoric, and dialectics. So let's go to the debate now. So what do we do tonight? We have three statements, three propositions, and we will go over them one by one. So maybe we can go to the first, I'll first give some explanation. We'll do it in a fixed order, obviously. So we'll start with the first statement, and then I'll give the floor to the two opponents. They will argue pro and against, I'll also give them some room for discussion. And after that, I will turn to you as the audience. And you can come up with questions to the opponents, but they should be related to the topic at hand. And if they're not, I will let you know. We have a little bit of a limitation in the sense that there's only two microphones. I have one, and there's a second one, which over here, which I will give to the one whom I will be giving the floor. And obviously there will be our two speakers for tonight. And when there's time for questions, I think one of the a member of the organizing committee will bring the microphone to you. If you are the one who's given the word by me. So I think that's clear. We have 1.5 or maybe a bit less time left. So we better start, I think. You prepared for the debate?
Conversation.
Conversation,
yeah.
Okay.
Discussion.
Let's see. Conversation, discussion. We'll see what it is. So let's now go to the first statement. Yeah, life as a meaning. I got informed that there's also the possibility to do a poll, to do in advance, to figure out who agrees. So there are 4 choices even. So we start with the proposition life has a meaning, and you're invited to vote. And there is 4 choices. You can strongly agree, somewhat disagree, and you can even strongly disagree. So will we see the outcome immediately, or do we do that after the debate? Could also be. Well, the majority of the audience, at least in this room, strongly agrees with this statement, life has a meaning. Well, there is still some development, but I think the winner is clear. Let's now turn to you, Boris and Manuel. I'd like to start with you, Boris. So, yeah, you'll get the microphone, of course. Is it on? I guess so. Yeah. Go ahead. So you have like 5 minutes time to 5 minutes to explain your position when it comes to this statement. Life has a meaning, and then we go to Emanuel.
Yeah.
Floor is yours.
You have to switch it on.
Like this? Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Hello, good evening all to you. I'm very flattered to be invited by a Christian organization to talk about the meaning of life, because you're always a little bit of the outcast. And I'm also handicapped today, as you can see. Yesterday I broke my foot while I was just walking down the stairs. So that was the reason. That's the reason why I'm here like that. When I was yesterday in the hospital at 11 o'clock, around that, next to me there were 2 Muslim guys. One was had fallen off because I was in the emergency in the hospital. 2 Muslim guys, beards, very conservative dressed, and it was obviously not good with one of them. He broke a lot of things. Turned out later on in the evening, because we were constantly in the same rooms together. And It was horrible, and I broke my foot, so it was not as bad as with him, but it was a lot going on. And the two guys didn't knew really each other. They were just coming from the mosque, and one of them was on a scooter and he fell off, and the other guy recognized him. Oh, I know you from the mosque, so I will help you to the hospital. So that was cool that he did that. And they were killing time by talking about their belief.
Whether or not life has a meaning. Is that what you brought up immediately?
That I of course thought about this evening, and they were talking about, well, we are challenged by our belief, and everything has a meaning, and like that. And to give it a place, I don't think that he was falling off of his scooter that had a meaning. It was an accident, and it was.
You think the accident was quite meaningless?
Meaningless, yeah. And there was no purpose in it. So if I would have had the choice to choose between those aspects, those items, I would say no. Life has no meaning in itself. To fall off your scooter, it has no meaning. Me falling off the stairs, it has no meaning. Also other things, the bigger things, the good things of life, at the end of the day, has no meaning. I had heard this meme on TikTok. We talked about our social media presence, and I'm also on TikTok. And I saw there an atheist guy who said, if you shrink down the earth to the proportion of a tennis ball, it would be as smoother than any ball we have that we use, like tennis or billiards, of course, that's snooker. So every big mountain or deep ocean is so superficial that it's from space, it's nothing. We are really small in space. So if it's really meaningful what we are doing here today, that's in the scale of the universe. I think my guess would be that it's in itself it's meaningless. But I'm here, and I like to be here. I really did my efforts to be here because I think the wonder of being human, and that's different from other species, is that we, by evolution, we are capable to make meaning. And so I think my life has a lot of meaning. If I would have been asked this question for my personal life, so yeah, my life has a lot of meaning. I have 2 children, I'm in a relationship for 6 years, I have a lot of friends, even the things that happen to me that are bad. I have been separated with a loved one, and my parents died, and so the usual stuff that a human being experiences. And all that, although I know in the big scale it has meaningless, and yeah. So nobody knows.
Even what you experience as items or as stuff that happens in your life that has meaning, maybe meaningless in the end. Is that what
it's meaningless at the beginning or in the end, but in between, I live my life, and I'm capable, and we are capable, to give structure to things that are unstructured, and that's given a lot of meaning. So I think the wonder, and it's not a wonder because it's based on evolution, I think, that we as human beings are capable of making meaning is giving life. It gives, for myself, life meaning. But it's coming from ourselves. It's coming not from nature, because that if there is a meaning, then it's existence. So stay. We have to have children so that life will continue. That's the basically biological way the living things are working. But in the meantime, we are able, even animals, even other species, to have an interesting life and a meaningful life. So, yeah. So I'm strongly disagreeing with this one, and I strongly, on a personal level, agree with this.
Yeah. Okay. So So you kind of agree with this statement, though you give your own explanation, and there's also a perspective from which you would say life is meaningless. So let's go to Emanuel, and curious to hear your position.
Okay, so let me start by thanking the Veritas-forum for having me tonight and to participate in tonight's debate. And let me also thank Boris for joining me in this evening's discussion. It's good to be back in the city where I once studied mathematics and became a mathematician. So before I became a philosopher. So it's good to be back and to see how the university has evolved. And the scenery has changed dramatically since the late 90s, I would say. So tonight we inquire into the question of the meaning of life. Now that's a big question. What is the meaning of life? Is there a meaning to life, right? Now many people find things meaningful such as, for example, beauty, or wisdom, or knowledge, or for example, truth, right? Or connection, or family. But there's one thing I believe that everybody would agree on is meaningful, and that is love. Love is for certain meaningful, right? So you need life to love. So given the fact that life is essential or necessary for love, I would argue, since love is meaningful, surely life is meaningful. However, the famous French writer, Michel Houellebecq, notes that given the nature of modernity, there is nowadays hardly any room left for love. But that the ideal of love is still undiminished. Now, this ideal cannot diminish because, as an ideal, it is outside of time. Now, not only the ideal of love, I would argue, but even love itself is outside of time. Love is not of this world. It enters, you could say, it enters into our lives from a transcendent, if not divine, origin. And in fact, in our strongly secularized world, only love would still remind us to the transcendent origin of ourselves. So in fact, I would argue, in this ground, love, we find our ultimate answer to our ultimate question. What is the meaning of life? Well, the meaning of life is love. Love is light. Love is life. That's why, for example, in the movie The Tree of Life, Mrs. O'Brien proclaims, and I quote, "Unless you love, your life will flash by." And that's why Mozart has it that love is the soul of genius and thus the source of all creation and all creativity. But also, in the movie Nymphomaniac, Joe argues the secret ingredient of sex is love. Even in logic, even in mathematics, love is vital. For we must love logical consistency in order to reject the inconsistencies that human reason brings to light. Ultimately, love even goes above truth. The medieval philosopher Augustine teaches that the goal of truth is love, and not the other way around. Whoever puts truth above love does so because of a love for truth. So that in that case, still love takes precedence over truth. That's why, given the choice, Dostoevsky chooses love and not truth, because life is bigger. And also the Apostle Paul chooses love above truth. Right? I quote, "If I have all powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith, so as to remove mountains, but have no love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, but have no love, I gain nothing." So love is patient and kind. It bears all things. It endures all things. It never ends. So, as Paul proclaims, faith, hope, and love remain. These three. But the greatest of these is love. So love, I would argue, is truly the ultimate ground of our existence. And if God exists, and if God is love, and if we are God's image, as the Bible proclaims, then the true purpose of our life must be love. We shall love.
Thank you. Before we go to the audience, I'd like to first have a second round. And I do have two specific questions for the two of you. On the one hand, I'd like to invite Boris to give his perspective or to react on the idea of love, which is so essential for the meaning of life and which may even take away the meaning of the absence of meaning, an experience that you also described. And my question to Emanuel would be, what would be your perspective on the experience of the absence of meaning, as was indicated, sketched by Boris? Is that something that can be overwhelmed by love, or is that still something which is there and that you need to deal with? So I do have two specific questions, and I really hope that you can answer these. So first go to Boris. What do you think about the experience of love?
Well, it's very important. Let's go back to the hospital yesterday, where this guy from the mosque said to his mosque friend, not even his friend, more an acquaintance, well, I go join you and I will go with you to the emergency and I will stand next to you. That's love. We can, of course, explain very abstract why somebody should do that, would do that.
It can also be the case that, oh, no, it's not working anymore.
Yeah.
There it is. That somebody hopes that he is in the same situation, somebody would do that for himself. That there's also some hope for love to him or herself. But I think love is such a thing that I see as something that we make meaning during our life, although there is a lack of meaning. So there is, we even if you look at primates or other intelligent beings, but even in lower animals, you will see that creatures doing things that are not direct in their own immediate interest to do something lovely, nice to someone else. And there you can explain that by all kind of reasons, also practical and self-interest reasons on the long run. But, well, that makes it maybe sometimes, especially with people, a little bit too flat. I think you can really do something because you love somebody else. So I really agree on most of the things that you were saying. That is a very important thing. I think curiosity, that's very important for human beings as well. We are curious. That's why we go to the moon, or that you are here on the university. Curiosity is a very interesting element of human being, and also something that gives meaning of life. But we are making that for ourselves. We invented that
so
ourselves.
it's still an illusion in a certain sense?
Well, it's an illusion that we have to celebrate, because it's something that we shouldn't be disappointed by. But we say, well, that's wonderful that we created this illusion that is in fact in the way of making our life worthwhile, and that we are happy, that we have a tool by how we can get happy, that we can be social to each other, and that we have a life together, and that we have societies and building societies. So I think to call it an illusion is too negative. But at the end of the day, if you look at it from a larger scale, then you would say, well, yeah, it isn't meaningful, maybe not in the universe. But we are not living on Mars, we're living on Earth.
That is true. Okay, well, let's go to Emanuel.
Yeah, so
what is your, my question to you was how you would deal with this experience of the absence of meaningfulness in life.
Well, not everything in life has meaning, of course. There are many things that just happen, accidents, bad things.
Yeah.
But I think there are things that are meaningful in life. And I mentioned love as the key paradigm of something that is truly meaningful And I see no reason why we should doubt the intrinsic meaning of love. That's what we experience. That's what people have always experienced throughout the ages.
So you disagree with this idea of illusion?
I don't think
that it's an illusion.
I don't think we have a reason to think it's an illusion. I think we have, if we perceive the physical world, we have sense perception, we have sensory perception of the physical world, which gives us a reason to think that there are physical objects, right?
Yeah.
That there are tables and chairs and so on.
Makes sense.
And we have no reason to doubt our sensory perception, right? We cannot step outside of ourselves, right, to check the truth of our sensory perception. We can trust that. And for the same reason, we have also the perception of moral values. So in moral experience, we apprehend a realm of moral values. Just as in the sensory experience, we apprehend a realm of physical objects.
So
and we have no reason either, I believe, to doubt our intrinsic moral experience. In the same manner as we have no reason to doubt the existence of tables and chairs. So I think we can embrace love altogether and together without doubting the objective nature of love.
So maybe a quick reaction from Boris, and then I go to the questions from the audience.
Well, but that maybe it's not good for the debate, but I don't really disagree with Emmanuel. I think that it's very good.
It's fine not to disagree.
That love and curiosity, for example, are very important and gives meaning of life in the way we have structured our societies and us as human beings, and even further on in the other animal world. So that's not a disagreement. The only thing, how does it, where does it come from? And I think if you evolve from the evolution or from other ways that we are built, how we are built now and how we think, there is an explanation why we love and why doing good is, and on the long run, good for us as a society. So there's an explanation. But so it's not meaningless. There's a natural explanation why we do that. But we have evolved as human beings so far that we are so very aware of the natural background of that. And that we do it because love in itself, and we write wonderful plays about it, or text, or music, and that's an achievement of humankind in itself.
Well, there's a small reaction. Go ahead, Manuel.
So,
Think about your questions.
Yeah, it might be true that our moral intuitions, our moral perceptions have evolved, but that doesn't entail that they are false or illusions. Let me explain. Our mathematical beliefs, our mathematical perceptions, have also evolved over time. But that gives us no reason to believe that our mathematical perceptions are false or illusions. And by the same manner, you could also argue that given the fact that we have evolved and our intuitions have evolved, it gives us no reason to think they are false. So that's important to remark. I believe in the objective nature of love. So I don't believe that we create the meaning of love. I think we discover, we find, let's say we meet this meaning of love because it is an intrinsic value in and of itself.
Let's hold this discussion for a moment and see if there's questions from the audience. So please, raise your hand if you have a question. So when asking the question, introduce yourself shortly and try to be as concise as possible in asking your question. Go ahead, in the middle.
Thank you. I have a question for Boris. I would like
so what's your name?
My name is Diman.
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
I would love for explanation. What is your definition? How do you define love as we know it as people? How do you know that? So that's my question. How do you define
love? It's a question to Boris.
Yes, how do you define that?
Yeah. And why are you asking that? Why is that relevant in the context of this discussion?
Yeah, since it was brought up as of the other speaker's point of view, as a source of meaning, I would love to see, what's the definition of the other speaker, so how he sees that, and how he encapsulates that in his meaning for his personal life.
Boris, you need to shift the microphone. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm not a scientist like everyone else, so I'm not like quoting all kind of philosophers, and I'm not like that. So I will do it from a very basic point of view of the work that I do. I think and also a little bit of the knowledge that is being written by others. But one of the things that love can do, there's a lot of things that you can say about that, is that you do something because of empathy, where you don't gain immediately from. That you say, well, I do that because I want to, I feel pity, or I want to help. And you can see that by human beings, but also in nature, that some animals are doing that. That's interesting, because you can say from an immediately point of view of existence, especially in the wild, you're constantly struggling for existence. It's interesting if creatures are doing something that is not in their direct interest. So that's one definition. The other can be more in a romantic way, that you say, well, I want to be, I want to stay with somebody, and I know that I will challenge together with the other person all kind of difficulties, but I try to be together with that person and try to battle the things that are on our way. That can be a point of love. I have 2 children. That's a very biological love. I have a lot of nieces and so and nephews. I love them very much, but my own children, my own flesh and blood, it's a very biological feeling if you see children of your own and how you love them. And how you can also be more angry to your own children than to other children, because you recognize your own biological things in characters. So there are all ways of loving somebody, but I think it has to do that you do something that you're loyal to someone, despite there is not always an immediate gain. Maybe even that you also are willing to challenge the difficulties in the relationship you have for the other. So I think, that's my definition of love. And I think there are also kind of reasons why we should do that. But I think we have developed as human beings that we can say, well, love is something that it's in our societies can be something separated only from the immediately self-interest way of how you can describe it from nature. Yeah, but that's something of a development.
Yeah, thank you, Boris, for your explanation. Is there another question? Well, I'll give you the word, but I also would like to invite people to ask questions related to this idea of the lack of meaning in life. I understood from the organizers that was also one of the backgrounds for organizing this debate. I mean, we live in a difficult and in a stressful world, and especially many of you are students, so you may encounter all kinds of difficulties that were not there back in the day. So don't hesitate also to elaborate on this lack of meaning. But go ahead.
Hi, I'm Birgit. I have a question for Emanuel. Earlier you said something, I can't quote it exactly, but it was something along the lines of that you didn't see a reason to doubt the intrinsic value or meaning of love. But for me, it isn't clear what would be, according to you, the intrinsic value or meaning of love, and how do you come to the conclusion that it has an intrinsic meaning?
Every time you get some time to prepare your answer. That's a good thing.
So, can we define the intrinsic meaning of love? I think some things simply cannot be defined. Certain moral values, for example, can be experienced but not defined. So, for example, if I say it's wrong, it's simply wrong to, let's say, to rape someone, or to do slavery, or to torture for fun, then I appeal to your conscious, I appeal to your moral experience, that you have that experience. Yes, that is really wrong. And that there is no argument, no skeptical argument that can convince you otherwise, So some things we simply experience, and we simply can trust our experience unless there is a strong defeater. So I can believe that I am here in Delft and I see you today, now, in front of me. I have that experience. And if there is no defeater, then I can simply hold on to my experience. And it's the same for moral experience. The fact that moral experience is inner experience, and that experience of the physical world is outer experience, which is difference, that is not a difference that is so significant that we should treat moral experience different from physical experiences. So I would appeal to the apprehension of these values. And you can train your moral experience by, for example, literature, by reading books, by looking at movies, by seeing people in agony. And then you can say, yes, this is really wrong, or this is really right. I mean, Michael Roos said once that the man who claims that 2 + 3 = 10 is equally wrong as the man who claims that torture for fun is right. So this is my appeal to our own human constitution. We can trust our experiences unless proven otherwise. Now, evolution is not a defeater. Some might say, well, but evolution, doesn't evolution defeat our moral experience? But the answer is no. Because evolution would only explain to us how certain beliefs originate. It explains how certain moral experience or certain moral faculties have evolved. Like our mathematical faculties, like our reasoning faculties, like logic, that's fine. But that doesn't entail that these beliefs are false. To say that moral experience is just an illusion because it has evolved by evolution is a so-called genetic fallacy. It is a genetic fallacy. It is basically saying, because the belief has evolved by evolution, it must be false. Well, if you play that card, all our beliefs become false, as I mentioned, even our mathematical beliefs. So I think we have all reason to simply trust our moral experience and to live by our moral experience. And I argue that love is maybe the most well-known example of a typical value that we perceive.
Let's go to another question. Yeah, in the middle again. So.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Gajan. I have also a question for Emanuel, maybe a follow-up question. Because, well, you are basically saying that you can study moral values and then you can experience that things are true, for example. But how can it then be possible that there are times in history, for example during the Second World War, where we have totally different moral values, where we find it okay to murder people and to kill people? How could that be possible then?
Okay, good question. Now, certainly, moral values can develop over time. People can develop, people can learn to become moral beings. That could be a learning process. There is maybe a moral development throughout the ages, throughout history. So I'm not claiming that everyone has perfect moral experience, of course not. Just as not everyone is able to see physical objects. We have blind people, right? But the fact that we have blind people that cannot experience physical objects doesn't mean that there are no physical objects. It doesn't mean that we have to take their, let's say, blindness as a reason to doubt the existence of physical objects. Now, on the same argument, people that are morally underdeveloped, I would argue, because they don't see, they don't experience the wrongness of torture or rape or racism, we should basically try to morally educate these people, to bring them into the moral experience by, again, literature, movies, confronting them with pain and agony. So that's for me an appeal to moral education and moral development. But it does nothing to let's say, to substantiate the falsehood of moral beliefs or moral values. That would be my response.
Okay, go ahead. In the same row, another question. So how many people do we have left in that row?
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Marcel, and I have a question for Emanuel as well. So we already discussed the meaning of life in a personal matter. But my question is more on the scale of the universe. Like if life on Earth stopped, then the Earth would still revolve around the Sun, and the Sun would still continue its path. So
the universe would go on
there's a meaning of life?
Even if there is no human beings left. Okay. And what would then be your question? If that occurs, then there is no meaning of life left.
Yeah. So if life has a meaning on the universal scale.
Aha. Yeah. Okay. So even without human beings, is there still meaning in life, in the universe?
So I'm a Christian, so in that case I would appeal to my worldview, which is Christianity, right? So for me, love points to a transcendent origin. And I believe the transcendent origin to which love points is God. I believe God is love. And I believe that we are created in the image of God. So that we have almost the obligation to love, right? We shall love. So for me, there is an ultimate meaning to humanity, to life, but also to the universe in that light. So God created the universe, God created the cosmos, God created humanity through evolution, I believe, because God is love, and God wants to engage in a loving relationship with creation, right? So for me that points to the loving nature, the essentially loving nature of God. That gives meaning to the entire cosmos, to the entire universe, from that perspective. It's not just about humanity, I would argue. It's about all living, ultimately it's about all living creatures. And ultimately it's about the whole creation. So
and that will remain even if there is no human beings left, because that was...
Yeah, so I believe, again, as Christian, I believe that there is a plan. I believe that God has some plan with the universe. That there is this notion of development in the universe, right? Your notion of growth, notion of evolution, moral evolution, ultimately. And I believe that ultimately there is a plan for humanity as such. So not all things will perish, ultimately. Not all things will go away. But again, of course, I would then appeal to my Christianity, which is my worldview.
Okay. Thanks, Emmanuel. Let's now go to Boris.
Yeah, to elaborate that a little bit. I think that if human race would be, or human kind of species would be erased from Earth, then the universe makes less sense. Not because that's how it is, but that's what I said. Because we have evolved to curious creatures, and I think curiosity is a sense in itself, is a meaning in itself. So if we wouldn't be there, it would be not as meaningful as it was, as the last millions of years that humankind is here. If there is on the other part of the universe a creature that is very curious on that, then there's still a lot of meaning for the universe. But I think if there's somebody interested in, my God, I'm on this planet, and I want to be on another planet, I think that is a meaning in itself, being curious. Then on the other part, about love and the meaning of that. I'm a humanist, and I think if I look at history and answer your question, why all those worst, bad things have been happening through whole world history, one of the key issues there is that we inhumanize, is that the right word? That we say, well, it's not a human, or it's not equal to me. That's one of the basic points why we are doing the most horrible things to each other. Jews are not equal to us. Black people are not equal to us, so we can, or other parts of another country, Ukraine people are not as good as Russian people. It's the source of a lot of terror in the world. And we overcome that by human rights and those kind of things, but it's not a stable thing. We have to gain that human rights fundament constantly again, because to estrange other people from you is going on every school yard, in every school, every day. Yes, you have to, because it's in our nature that things that are different from us, that we are a little bit scared from that. Even in biology, you will see that the amount of people where persons, human beings, can be involved with is limited, like 150 or something, 148. It has been found out to compare us with other primates. There is a limitation to our empathy. So it's very logical that outside of that number, we think, oh, they're different, and they're enemies, and they're a threat for us. We try to overcome that by human rights, and by social networks, and by governments and democracy, to offer social security systems that we can live beyond our natural boundaries of empathy. But, and that's the same thing with love. Part of the love that is in society, I think one of the things that we tried through society is that we, as human beings, try to be engaged and have empathy for people that we don't know, that are not our children, and that we pay taxes to help somebody on the other parts of the world, of our countries. So that's the institutionalized form of love. And I think that's civilization. And everywhere where we are not doing that anymore, and we are thinking, well, they're bad people, they're not even people, where we silence people, where we give not a voice to people, then we have difficulties. And you see in society, in history, that through the ages, whole parts of societies didn't have a voice. They couldn't write, they couldn't express their opinions, they couldn't vote. Those kind of things that we try to evolve to a more inclusive society, but it's not a stable position. It's constantly challenged by our own nature that at the end of the day we are very limited in who we love and how much people we can love.
Okay, thank you for this explanation. I think we'll now go to the second proposition. We need to go on because time's ticking. Yeah, so maybe you can ask your question in the second round. But let's now go. Can you have the second statement? So, second statement is objective moral values exist and are grounded in nature. Well, I will follow the same procedure. First discussion between Boris and Manuel, and then we'll go to you again. And so think about the questions that you want to ask. And the middle row over there is excluded this time. So we'll now start with Emanuel.
So, do objective moral values exist?
Yeah, wait a moment. We first have the poll. I forgot it. So let's see what we think about this, and then you can start. Otherwise, you're influencing, obviously. That's not allowed. Okay. So there's more variation than in the previous statement. Okay. Yeah, so there is still a majority of the people that kind of agree. There's also quite some people who disagree with this statement. So that sounds interesting. Go ahead, Manuel.
So the question is, first of all, do objective moral values exist? Now, I surely believe there are objective moral values. But what do I mean with objective? I mean this. Some things are truly wrong, and some things are truly good or right. They are good or right, independent of our own opinions, or preferences, or conventions. That's what I mean with objective. So, torture for fun is wrong, which is objectively true, even if nobody would believe this. Even if tomorrow nobody would believe this, I argue it's still wrong to torture for fun. That is what I mean with objective. I believe we have all reasons to assert based upon our moral experience, as I explained, that there are certain things that are truly wrong and truly right. Not everything, of course, you know, there are social conventions, absolutely, but some things are objectively valuable or objectively indeed good or bad. Now, if there are objective moral values, right, there should be a ground for these objective moral values. There should be a foundation for it. There should be a truth maker for these moral values. What makes it true, for example, that torture for fun is wrong? What makes it true that slavery is wrong? What makes it true that love is right? Well, on naturalism or physicalism, if there is no God and we just inhabit a material universe, there seems to be no truth maker for these truths. On naturalism, for example, there's nothing special about human beings. We are just a species amongst other species. We are part of the animal kingdom. As Dawkins proclaims, we are machines for propagating DNA. So, on naturalism, without God, there is no basis, no foundation to treat, for example, humans as different from other animals. To think that we are so special, that we have objective value, is basically to be guilty of speciesism, right? An unjustified bias, you could argue, towards our own species. Think about this. If we would rewrite the whole evolution, and we would start evolution all over again, then a totally different creature with totally different features would have emerged. That creature would have a totally different moral code, right? Different from our code. So on naturalism, on physicalism, if there is no God, there is no reason at all to believe that this creature has a moral that is objective, or that we have a moral that is objective. There is no objectivity. There is no independent truth to moral. We have moral feelings, we have moral beliefs, we act morally, that's all true. We are still moral creatures or moral beings. But there is no objective truth to morality at all. It's ultimately a reflection of the human development according to evolution. So, yes, there are objective moral values, absolutely, but to understand that these values need a ground, a foundation, brings us to a non-naturalistic, to a transcendent ground for the objective truth of these moral values and duties. And I believe as a Christian that transcendent ground ultimately, of course, points to God as the creator and as the ultimate ground for the objective moral values and duties.
Okay, thank you. Now it's your turn, Boris. Can you give your perspective on this statement?
Yeah, I already pinpointed a little bit of this direction in my first statements, first statement. Yeah, I think, you know, if you don't believe in a personal God, like I do, I'm curious how it is so inefficient that after so many millions of years that human beings and other creatures developed, that we are now, that it needed it for us to have now, in the last 100,000 and more years, to have those moral values. Then God, if He exists, or she exists, or it exists, had a lot of time to wait before that ideal situation is there. I think it's not logical. I see it more logical if you look to nature that the more developed creatures are and the more developed social structures are, that you can see that there is something to gain to be moral or to have things that we consider as human beings that we say, well, that's kind of morality. There's I already mentioned that, but a lot of research to primates that are helping disabled, like me, I am now, other apes to help them. Even dolphins help each other if they're disabled in a way. If there is a problem with somebody who is chasing some animal and other animals going to help that other animal, despite that they are also then in danger to be killed at last, that is at the end of the day explainable by the common interest of the group. And there's been a lot of research on that, that some species are looking more to the group interests instead of their personal interests. And that they can even gain something in the group if they do such an effort. So there are all kind of very egocentric reasons for species to do something good for another. And that you see that in all kind of intelligence species, not only with primates and humans, but even in insects, bees, those kind of. So you see all kind of elements that you can learn from and say, well, that's interesting that they are doing a thing like we are doing. Only the big difference is that for human beings, we are capable to write that down and to reflect on that and to say, well, am I doing this out of self-interest, or am I doing it because I really want that, or I really love the other one? And we can reflect on that, we can sing about that, and we can philosophize about that. And that's wonderful about being a human being, but at the end of the day, we started as insects, and we started as mammals on a lower scale, and it all developed in what we are now. So I think that it's also very, because religion is mentioned a lot of times, that can be inspiring. I find it very inspiring to look at other creatures and to recognize certain aspects, so to see, well, it's interesting, I have that same, or that you have that you have a bad feeling about things, that you feel it in your stomach, and that is coming from a natural order. That's interesting, and it can be also very not transcendent. It's not about something above us, but that you see that you are related to other creatures. And I find it very inspiring that we are one of the creatures on Earth, and that we are not that special as we thought we were. That we are very, very comparable with other species on this Earth. I find that in a way very inspiring.
Okay, thank you. I think we go to a second round, and I again do have two additional questions to the two of you. To Emanuel, I would like you to react on this, on the explanation that Boris gave when it comes to the evolution of morality. If I understand your position correctly, Emanuel, you don't disagree with the idea of evolution of morality, whereas Boris then says, well, if that is true, then for me this idea of a transcendent ground, or the presence of a personal God, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because why did he come so late, this morality? So that's one question that you may bear in mind. And to Boris, I'd like to ask you to elaborate a bit on this, again on this transcendent ground that Emanuel comes up with. Well, it's clear for me that you don't take that. But why does it just not make a whole lot of sense to you, or do you have a special argumentation why you think that we need to be convinced that there is no such a thing as a transcendent ground or even a personal God? So that's my question to you, but first to Boris, to Emanuel.
Yeah, okay, so I think we agree both that our moral faculties have evolved. There has evolved a kind of herd morality amongst human beings, right? Because certain behavior is simply advantageous for survival. So we agree on that. But I would argue that if you believe that is all there is to morality, just the herd morality, which is just social, biological adaptation and evolution, then ultimately you should agree that there are no objective moral values, that morality is just ultimately not objective. Because again, if we play the movie of evolution again, and we will look at the whole evolutionary process again, a complete different creature might have evolved with a different herd morality. So the herd morality is there, it can be observed.
But at the start, at the beginning of the evolution, there is no herd morality at all.
No, it has evolved.
So that is a situation that Boris may want to criticize.
It has evolved, right? I think we both agree to that. So I would argue, given the fact that there are in fact objective moral values, which can be argued for, as I did earlier, so that morality is more than just a herd morality, you can argue that there must be a non-natural ground for these objective moral values. Because again, if all there is to nature is just nature and more nature, and all there is to evolution is just that, just evolution, then ultimately, again, there are no objective values, because in that case, for example, we do not have any moral obligations against each other. Take for example the animal kingdom. In the animal kingdom, animals do not have any moral obligations against each other. One animal can kill another animal, but it doesn't murder it. One animal can take food from another animal, but it doesn't steal it, right? So there is no, on naturalism, there are no moral obligations in the animal kingdom, and also not in the human world, because we are just, in that case, we are just animals. Now I believe, to the contrary, that there are in fact genuine moral obligations in life. So that for me is a sign that points to a transcendent origin, which is then the foundation, which is then the ground of these objective moral obligations. So we can both agree that the morality has evolved, but I would argue that in addition to that, in fact, our faculties point to objective moral values.
But we can only conclude that while we are now in this more advanced state of morality.
I would agree to that.
This would not have been possible in the early stages.
I would agree to that, yes. At some point you can conclude this, yes.
Okay. Well, let's go to Boris.
Yeah.
You can give your reaction and maybe also
I
elaborate
think
on this.
we are already in a world where there's a lot of different forms of evolution has been taking place. We see a lot of other creatures where you see completely different paths than we did, that we took. And you can say in general that if organisms, if species are able to work together, they're stronger and they are capable of more complex societies. So you can say that's an objective thing that is proven into nature, whether it's ants or bees or whatever, it's everywhere. So I can say, well, that's something that is in nature, that working together is a good thing. So it's not coincidental that a creature like the Homo sapiens is more successful at this moment in history, because we were able to work together, but also to overcome the individual lack of talents that can be found by coexisting species that is not maybe even part of your own family, that you work together and that you allocate the talents on the position in society that it works for the bigger group. And of course, we are so much further and can reflect on our morals and our ideas that we have topped it with a lot of other stuff if you compare it with nature. But it's not true that in society, although that in the animal kingdom, that there is no way that animals see stealing or other ways of thinking that we say that it's immoral to do that. That it's not recognizable by some species. For example, if you give one dog some treat and the other dog another treat, a better treat, then at the end of the day, that other dog that will get the bad treat, he is not willing to cooperate anymore with you as much as he did before. Same you can see with certain monkeys. So there is a sense of honesty or even revenge, that somebody did to one ape to another something and he remembers that and he will take revenge later on.
So there's
So there
also
are
certain morality.
Yeah, there is morality and there is
some.
some anger also that's linked to the way of the intelligence of that species. Then your question about the God, you know, that's for a debate with a humanist atheist like me always a complex one, because if somebody says, do you say no for sure that there is no God or something transcendent? I don't know. I have no clue. And how does this existence in this world start? I have no idea. You don't have, I have no idea. And I don't have it either. So I cannot prove that there's something transcendent in this universe. But I think it's very unlikely that there is a God that introduced some moral values to us where we didn't figure it out ourselves in our nature of the way how we work together. You know, if people point to Moses and the Ten Commandments, you know, there's people say, well, our society is built on those moral values. No, because before that, stealing was not very good as well, and murdering somebody because there's no reason for it. It is just a codification of things that we have been, I think all kinds of societies have been around that time, and before that was completely normal. So there's only one thing that was new, there's only one God. That was new, but the rest of it was quite normal in all kinds of societies.
Yeah, okay, yeah, let's
maybe very short.
Yeah, very short.
Very short.
Okay,
So I think, what I would not argue is that belief in God is required to know the good, to know the bad. I would never say that.
So it wouldn't make a difference in practice, is that what
My
you say?
point is more like, it's not the belief in God that is necessary to know the good, or to be a good person, or to have a moral theory. It's God that is the ontological foundation for there being objective moral values. That's a different point I want to make, you see? So the atheist and the theist can be moral beings alike, and can know the good and the bad alike. That's not the discussion. But if you believe that there are objective moral values in the sense I defined, so independent of our opinions, our preferences, our conventions, if you believe that, then you can argue there must be a ground, a truth maker for these objective moral values. And in nature, in matter, you cannot find these truth makers. So you have to go to a transcendent origin beyond nature.
But it doesn't lead to different behavior. Is that what you...
No, it's more like an argument for God's existence. So you would say something like this: objective moral values exist. If God doesn't exist, there would be no objective moral values. There would be just a herd morality. Therefore, it would follow God exists.
Okay, well, existence of God was not the topic of tonight, but it's good to touch upon it. You've been silent for quite a while now, but I'd like to invite you to speak up. So there is people in one row from the back, in the middle. Go ahead, speak up.
Hi, my name's Nathan. I was pretty moved by the concept of absolute morality. I was thinking of when the British arrived in India in 1757. They saw people burning bodies and were appalled by that, but the Indians later explained that's something we do out of love for our relatives. And they were similarly appalled when they discovered that the British, they dug graves for their bodies. So this, to me, sounds like something that, well, for probably both groups, sounds like an objective moral value, but where does the sum, because Emanuel mentioned that there was some eventually objective moral values, how do we come to that? Is it something political? Is it something that eventually will work itself out through evolution? What are your views on this?
Okay, thanks. So what did the Indians exactly do? They burned bodies, or?
Yeah, they burned the bodies as a rite of passage, like we do with burials.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think that's a question to both of you. I mean, how objective is the morality that we do favor now?
So we need to make a distinction between absolute morality and objective morality. So absolute morality would be to have absolute rules that are universal and that apply in all cases, that are without any context. I don't argue for an absolute morality. I argue for an objective morality, that certain values, certain values indeed are real, really exist. And I don't argue that all moral values are really existent. I think only a few maybe are really objectively valid. So as for example, these things like love indeed, you know, true love, or indeed the wrongness of rape or torture. Just some things, at least, you know, are objectively good and bad. So I don't argue that all morality is just objectively true or false. Many moral things are just conventions and codes and cultural, you know, manifestations.
So there's also a great grey zone in which you can disagree and debate.
But at least some things, you know, are truly wrong or truly bad.
Yeah.
And I would like to focus only on that minimal set of objectively existing moral values. Yeah.
Want to comment on this as well?
Yeah, well, I think we are against rape, and you can understand that rape is a bad thing if you see that the woman or the man who is raped is equal to you. And that it could be your sister or your brother or who else. That could, and if that's, although somebody else is looking different than you, other religion or no religion or whatever it takes, if you are willing to see that he or she is equal to you, then the morality comes up, and you say, well, I cannot do that. And even that you cannot treat animals that are not same to you, that you cannot treat them the way you want, that you can torture them. That's the discussion we have now about agriculture and about those kind of things. Very important to say, well, why should we torture those animals? So I think that if we go around the Britain, people come to India and see that there are burned people, and they say, well, they're lower than us because, well, we are more involved, developed, then they will see that as barbaric. And if they know that those people are not barbaric and that they are the same at the end of the day, then they have an opening to think, well, maybe they have a point that in a very busy country you can better burn them than to dig a grave. And like 100 years ago, it was forbidden to cremate, is that the right word? In the Netherlands and other Western country people. And it was a real fight to get that legalized in the Netherlands and other parts of the world. So, but it's coming from the beginning that you arrive there and you say, well, those people, they are equal to us. And that's something that is not in general in our immediate nature, that people who are outside of our 150 group, that you see them as equal. And we try constantly to overcome that problem.
Okay, thank you. Is there more questions? By the way, also feel free to ask questions in Dutch. I mean, if needed, I can translate it. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Gina, and I had a question in particular for Boris. Because I was wondering about you touched on self-interest in moral values, that it's usually coming from self-interest, even things like love and kindness. And I was wondering, for instance, if I come along and see someone who's mugged in some alley, and I'd probably have the herd instinct, wrote down some words in it, telling me to run. Or no, sorry, telling me to help the person, because it could just be me also. Or I could also have the preservation instinct to run, because the same thing could happen to me, and the safest way out is to get out of the spot. But in that dubio between different choices I have, there's also a voice that usually sides with the weaker argument, telling me, yeah, to stay and help that person. If that is a morality that judges between actions, isn't that something that is not either of them? It's not a herd instinct nor self-preservation. It's something that judges saying you should help, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that something that is embedded in us as humans, or do you see that as something else? How would you?
Very good question.
I think it's a good question.
No.
Go ahead.
Well, if you're a very good question, thank you. If you are in an alley, you see that, and you are very strong, then you would maybe think, well, I can handle this situation. If you're not that strong, but you feel this urge to help somebody, maybe you do it. If you're pregnant, you say, well, I have to protect something else. So that it's from different perspective of the situation that you act or not act. That's first. The second thing is there something else than the hurt and then the self-interest? Yes, of course. Because we are a mixture of all those kind of things, and we can have different ideas at the same time. In every personal life you can have in your relationship or with friends that you feel different things battling to each other. You can also, from an instinct, do things. You know those stories about people who freeze if they are in panic, or they run, or they fight. So it's also a character thing sometimes. And I think that I have 2 kids, and what I found very interesting to see a little baby growing up to be a bigger girl and a bigger boy, that's all those elements that are later on so complex as you describe it, that it's not the one way or another, that it's built up when you look at your son or your daughter, very almost like a computer, like they do this or that, and then they do something else with it. And it's very, you have a lot of oversight in what they're doing. And after a few months, it's becoming complexer. It's like reading, for example. They first see a letter, and then a word, and then a sentence. And after a while, they just, they don't see the words anymore, the letters, but they just see the page and they can read it. So we are capable as human beings that we are not very fragmented, modular kind of people. We can, after a while, mingle that to a new invention, in a way, of morality, of those kinds of things. So it's not only made of one way or another. So I think in that way, yeah, it exists, that you can feel a different thing, something new, that can be also your character, that is above those 2 choices that you have.
Okay, let's continue. Yeah, more questions? Yeah, in the back row again.
Hi, am I allowed to ask a question regarding the previous statement?
You are.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, it took me some time to formulate this properly in English, then I found out you can ask it in Dutch, but I'll ask it in English. Okay, so
you're doing great.
How could humans have developed the capacity to desire meaning in life if fundamentally meaning doesn't exist? If you're hungry, that's because there's food to satisfy that hunger. Wouldn't it make sense that if we as humans possess a desire for meaning that transcends culture, race and time, it's because there's an actual meaning to life that's real and not an illusion?
Is that a question to Emanuel or to Boris? I guess to Boris?
Boris. Yeah.
Boris, okay. Sorry to get back to the first statement, Boris.
Yeah, but that's no problem, because it's a very good one. Is love or is curiosity something that is outside the nature? I think at the end of the day, curiosity is for us very important to exist, and that we are that it's a natural thing to be curious for us. For example, if we know that in some millions, or a few thousand years, a long time, our universe will collapse. Because we are contracted by the sun, it's for our human beings very natural to say, well, let's go to other planets, let's go to other parts of the universe and try to see if there's possibility to live there. So you can say for the herd mentality, it's very important to space travel, for example. It's a little bit science fiction, this answer, but I think at the end of the day, for to exist as human beings, our curiosity can help us to survive very big threats to our existence. So, yeah, and then I think that's natural. That's something that's not only that if a lion would know that there's a problem in the far future, he or she would migrate as well. We are capable to have that knowledge because we develop that in that way. But I think a rabbit would do the same if he would have developed in that same direction.
Okay. Yeah. Back to the. Well, I didn't have questions from the front row yet, so let's do it. Can you go to this guy first?
Thanks. I have a question for Boris. Sorry, for the other guy, for Manuel. So you told us that evolution cannot explain away objective moral values, with which I agree. But is it able to explain away our experience of them? And is our experience of them the only way, or the only argument we have to believing in them? And is it then more like a weak case, actually?
Mm-hmm. So can evolution explain away our moral experience, right? Well, it can if you believe in naturalism. If you are an atheist, if you are a naturalist, if you believe that the world is just a physical world and there's nothing more than that, then evolution, by definition, is unguided, right? It's just unguided. It's just focused on survival value. We have the beliefs we have because they have been advantageous for survival. And in that case, you have your defeater. Then you could say the moral experience doesn't really point to anything beyond the natural world because evolution is just unguided. But then already you assume naturalism, then already you assume atheism, which is fine, but you have to see that you are then in a circle, in the atheistic circle. But on theism, for example, right, on Christianity, for example, evolution is no defeater at all for our moral experience. Because if God exists, right, then the evolutionary process would be guided instead of unguided. So we have all reasons to believe our moral experience. And so when we start with moral experience first, and we park for a moment the debate between atheism and theism, right? And we just take the moral experience at face value, then at that point in time, epistemically, we are entitled to, by default, to believe our moral experiences. And to say, that gives a reason for the assertion of there being objective moral values. So I don't think that evolution takes away the warrant for moral experience, unless you already assume atheism. But that's precisely the point of the whole debate. So again, we have good reasons to believe, to trust, to embrace, to accept our human experiences, either sensory, of the physical world, or again, innerly, of the moral realm. So that would be my answer to that. Yeah.
More questions? In the middle row.
Thank you. I have a question for Boris. It's about objective moral values and regarding topic of human rights that you mentioned earlier. And when you were speaking about human rights through the lens of humanism, I noticed that a lot of terms were used, like we have to, I believe, to protect the human rights, and that equality between humans is a foundation for morality in your worldview. So my question is, what is the ground that you stand on to keep these claims that they are good, that they are true? How do we fight for true, good human rights if the meaning of those is subjective term that everyone can freely define for themselves? What are true human rights? And to touch on your picture of a civilization that you had in an earlier moment and the meaning in that civilization, what if in today's times there's a civilization that outgrows or conquers another weaker, smaller civilization? Why should that civilization care for the other when again, at the end, it comes to their subjective definition of human rights for their society, for their civilization, and it comes to at the end to the model of survival as the fittest, as decider.
So this is a question to Boris, I guess?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I would like to propose that Boris gives a short answer to this question, because we already touched upon this, right, in previous Q&As.
Yeah.
And then I would like to devote like 10 minutes to the last statement.
Yeah, that's good.
Before we come to an end.
You know, we have had human rights. Sometimes it is said that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights has been thought of in the 1940s, and so it's very recent. It's not the case, of course. It's built on thousands of years of philosophy, of experience, of a lot of cultural insights, not only in the West, but in the whole world, of how's the best way to communicate, to live together. And of course they're developing at the same time, because some new human rights are put on it. I think there's still a case that universal rights, human rights, are in general really universal. I've been traveling a lot around the world, and I see that, of course, governments and all kind of states and institutions will say, well, China is completely different from the West of the world. We have our own values, and in other parts of the world they will say the same. But if you look in society, you see what's going on there. Not the superficial things, not the things that are more cultural, but really about the eagerness of people who wants to be free, wants to have saying over their own lives. That's a very fundamental thing that you see in all cultures. You see criticizing the gods also in the old India of 3,000 years ago. You see all those discussions that are very current. You have seen that everywhere where societies are written societies, written civilizations. You see doubts and discussions comparable with the discussions we have now. If you look through the superficial things. So you can say that all those discussions developed to a kind of universal declaration of human rights. And if you look at the most successful countries at this moment in the world, you can also see that from a survival of the fittest point of view. That's not an ideal society. The best societies that are the happiest in this moment, that are societies where the differences between rich and poor are the smallest. The Scandinavian countries, for example. So there's also in the more economical way, really things that we know when the differences are as reasonable as possible, that people are more happy. So we know from history really a lot about how we should build a society. That we're not capable of doing it is sometimes to do with all kind of economical or ideological issues, or poverty, or those kind of things. But at the end of the day, we basically know how to build a stable society, what's needed for that.
Okay, thank you. We'll quickly go to the last proposition. So that one kind of resembles a famous saying from Voltaire, French philosopher: if God does not exist, it would be necessary to invent him. So even if God does not exist, religion is still a good thing. And now, in the interest of time, we will only have one round, so I'll give the word to Emanuel, and then Boris will be really the last one who is talking about this statement. And then we will bring this debate or this conversation to an end. Emanuel.
So, I think we need to understand that worldviews, views of life. Oh, sorry again, of course, first voting, yes.
My fault. Yeah.
I thought it was, yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Most of the people agree to a certain extent. Go ahead.
So, to answer that question, I think we need to look at the human condition, right? As human beings, we are thrown in the world. and we seek guidance. We need to navigate the world. We need to orient ourselves in the world, one way or another. We have to live our lives, right? So we need, ultimately, we need some worldview, either religious or secular, to enable us to lead meaningful lives, to enable us to lead fulfilling lives, right? So, given the fact that ultimately we need some worldview, I think we need to look at criteria for rationally embracing worldviews that are both aimed at truth, but also that are practical and existential. So to rationally evaluate any worldview, either religious or secular, we need to take into account both epistemic criteria, is the worldview true, but at the same time, we also need to take into account practical and existential criteria. For example, does the worldview enable me to live a meaningful life? Does the worldview enable me to grow, personal growth or moral growth? Does the worldview enable me to improve the quality of my life? So these practical and these existential criteria are relevant at the very same time. So even if, for example, Christianity would not meet all the epistemic criteria, which I don't agree with, of course, but suppose, then
even if it's not true, then?
Even if it's not true, ultimately, then still, I believe it has, as a worldview, it has many features that really enable human beings, to live fruitful lives and to flourish. So I would still argue that even then on the existential and practical criteria, rationally speaking, Christianity would still have good papers, let's say, would still have good reasons to embrace, ultimately, even if not true. But of course, I believe certainly that there are good reasons to believe that, of course, Christianity is true.
Thank you. Boris, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't think there's a personal God. It's not logical. It's not. So I don't really care about the question, because I think I cannot know it. I will not know it if it's true. So it's not a very important issue for me. Religion, on the other hand, I really find very interesting, because religion is, well, a set of things that are able to be bought elsewhere as well, but are combined because of history, because of thousands of years of something that has an own identity. But if you really look good at it, you can slice it up in several things and see that it's all, you get it somewhere else too. One of the things I really like about religion, especially during the holidays, is singing. I really like Christmas songs. I really like it. And why do I like it? Because it's nice to sing along. It gives a sense of community. My grandmother was very religious. She said, "I feel God when I'm singing." I can understand it, although I'm not religious, because you feel something bigger than you. Although they're just notes written down by a composer, and it's real, it's all man-made. But I understand that it can give a religious feeling. The other thing is a society where you can go to, where the two guys from the mosque, that they were there, they were not friends, but they helped each other out. And you can overcome the biological boundaries of that you only can be interested in those 150 people around you, but you can make it bigger. And that can be done also in a society of people who are going to church or to a mosque or whatever. So I understand it. But all those things are separately seen in other parts of society. And I think, as a humanist, I don't believe in a God. I will not going to believe in a God. But I think it's very important for society to have places, hubs, where you can meet people that you normally wouldn't meet normally. And that you can also have experiences that are out of the context of politics or the government. Because as you said in your introduction of me, I am, for example, chairman of the Dutch handicap organization of the people who are disabled physically, but also intellectually. And one of the things that I hear from people who are, for example, who are handicapped, disabled, one of the biggest things they say, well, I want to have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or I want to just have friends. I want to have a social network. I want that. I want to have work because that gives meaning to my life. I want to contribute to society, and because of my disabilities or the perceived disabilities by others, I'm not able to do that. And a lot of those things cannot be arranged in laws. I was a member of parliament. You cannot make a law, you should be a friend with him. You cannot say that. But we all know how important it is to have friends and to have social networks. But you cannot arrange that in law. So you need societies, alternative societies, that can bring that and to have some stability in your life outside of the institutions that are made by the government. And I think in that way, for me as a humanist, that's one of the reasons that I joined the Dutch Humanists, because it tries to do something secular to bind people, free people together, and to do things together. And even if you are in misery, if you are dying, or if you are have difficulties in your relationships, that you can go to somebody and to talk about those life issues with somebody. And I think at the end of the day, that is very important, to have hubs in societies where you can go to meet other peoples, and that's very important, and that's still a good thing.
And those hubs can be churches.
It's not.
That's what you mean.
What do you say?
Those hubs can be churches.
That can be churches, but if you're one of the big problems with religion, that you have to believe in God for it. And if you don't believe that, then, you know, at the end of the day, if people worshiping a God that you don't believe in, and you think, well, it's a wonderful story, but it's not what I think it's not real, it's maybe literature, a very good, interesting literature, but it's not facts, then people will not go to church anymore. And I think it's very good if people believe that and go there. You know, that's I fully respect that. But a lot of people, majority in the Netherlands, is not believing that. And I think it's important to have other hubs, create other hubs, to have experiences of meeting other people in another way. It shouldn't be per se religion, but it can also be, you know, for example, during COVID, you saw that some football clubs, you know, or tennis clubs, or, you know, there's a meaning to go there because you want to go to sport there. But sometimes you saw that the older people who were members of the sports clubs were helped by the youngers to have their groceries. And I thought, that's what we need, because it should be.
It's a social network.
It's a social network. There are not hubs, you're helping someone else that you're not per se know. And I think that's a very good and very important part of society, and also of the future of society.
Well, thanks for your contribution here, Boris. I'm sure there are many questions, and you may want to ask questions to Boris and Emanuel. Well, the good thing is that this debate will come to an end, but there will be a borrel as well. Though Boris and Emanuel are no longer students, I guess they're still in for a small meal, and so they maybe will be hanging around for a while, and there's plenty of opportunity for you to ask your questions. For now, I'd like to bring this debate to an end. We may not have fully resolved our disagreements, though it was a very lively and respectful, I would say, discussion. We really have been listening to one another's viewpoints. And I think that's a testament of our shared commitment to finding solutions and ultimately to finding truth. With that, I'd like to bring this debate to an end and hand over to the organizers.